Hi again. This is William Cetnar's testimony in the book We Left Jehovah's Witnesses, edited by Edmond Gruss. This section is entitled, Charles de Wilda died on a park bench after 4 decades of faithful service. One of the tragic episodes which unfolded during my service at Watchtower headquarters concerned Charles de Wilda. Charlie, as we called him, had deserted from the cavalry after World War I, and in looking for a job he had walked into headquarters and asked for work. He was told that he could have a job, but that the pay was only room and board and $20 a month. He took the offer and had worked for over 30 years by the time I met him. By now Charlie was an old man and a little senile, and still was a very hard worker. President Knorr often used him as an example of how much work could be accomplished. He had been the best bookbinder on the 4th floor. Charlie, like all other Bethel workers, was not allowed to get married if he wished to remain in Bethel. Knorr had often stressed this policy, and Charlie resented it. But in 1952, in violation of the rule, President Knorr married Audrey Mock, one of the sisters at Bethel. Several years after the marriage, Charlie went to President Knorr and told him that he had broken his own rule and that he ought to resign. He also said to him, "You preach more about love than anyone in the world I know, but practice it least." As punishment for this confrontation, Charlie was removed from his assigned seat in the dining hall and placed in a remote corner. The excuse for this was that he had used foul language. It was obvious that he was being punished. He refused to stay in this new seat and returned to his usual table. It was made so difficult for him at Bethel that he packed his few belongings and walked out into the outside world. Bethel had been his entire life. He even spent his vacations there. He didn't know where he was going, and he had no place to go. But to him, anything was better than Bethel at the time. I met him later. He was staying in a horrible flophouse at 50 cents a night. After he ran out of funds, he began to ask Bethel workers and other witnesses for money to buy meals. I gave him some to meet his need. Bethel workers were told not to give Charlie any money, and a letter saying the same thing was sent out from headquarters to congregations in the area. This was an effort to force him to return. The last I heard was that Charles de Wilda died on a park bench. This is the reward a man gets after 4 decades of faithful service in God's organization, because he pointed out an obvious inconsistency. This was one example that revealed to me how little love there really was at headquarters for the people working there. Another incident comes to mind. One young man had 4 of his fingers cut off in the paper trimmer. Because he was no more use in the factory, he was sent out as a pioneer to fend for himself. His accident was not compensated because the insurance to cover such accidents was too expensive. I could not accept such an explanation for not having insurance. Why? I was told by Myron Quackenbush, the society controller, that the total cost of manufacturing a book like Let God Be True, which is over 300 pages, which sold for 50 cents, was only 7 cents. We were printing each day a stack of these books as high as the Empire State Building. There were similar profits in the publishing of other materials. In addition, thousands of Jehovah's Witnesses die each year and will their estates to the Watchtower Society. Many thousands more donate money on a regular basis each year. There are many who give large sums as special gifts. I had such a gift given to me for the society one day by a sailor who disembarked from his ship, made his way to Brooklyn, left $1,000 with me, and asked that the gift remain anonymous. There's also great profit in the conventions held each year, through offerings and through the food concessions. For example, at Yankee Stadium in 1958, there were over 250,000 people at the convention. The prices on the food were moderate, but the labor was free, and what food was not donated by witnesses was bought at wholesale prices. I once figured that a person could become wealthy on the sale of pies alone. I concluded this on the basis of knowing what the pies cost and what they were sold for in their slices. The excuse of insurance being too expensive to cover the factory workers in case of accident did not hold up to investigation and was just another indication of the lack of concern for the welfare of the headquarter workers. Another subhead, we couldn't afford to care for the witness girl properly. This callous decision had cost her her life. Another incident shook my faith in the organization and its leadership. In 1956 or 57, two young ladies came from Thailand to receive missionary training at Gilead. The pressures of learning the language and the other necessary subjects caused one of them to suffer a mental breakdown. She was periodically driven by an overpowering compulsion which caused her to take off her clothes and run through the building. She was sent to Bethel with the hope that she might be able to relax some and recuperate. But her condition grew worse, and she tried to commit suicide by attempting to jump from the Bethel home. President Knorr told Worth Thornton, Transportation Secretary, to send the girl back to Thailand the cheapest way as soon as possible. Arrangements were made to place her on a train to San Francisco, and there she would board a ship for Thailand. When she learned of this, she begged to be placed on a plane or to have another missionary accompany her. She explained that when she had the spells, she could not control herself, and if she were on a ship, she might jump overboard. Both of her requests were refused as being too expensive. Worth Thornton was also very upset about this, a fact known to me because I had discussions with him about the matter. The girl was put on the train, and at San Francisco she boarded a merchant vessel. When the ship passed Hawaii, she had one of her seizures and jumped overboard. The ship circled back to search for her, but she was never found. Possibly she had been eaten by sharks. The ship notified the society by radiogram about what had happened. The message was received by Arthur Barnett, who was operating the switchboard at Bethel. Russell Kurtzen, Bethel receptionist, also learned of the tragedy. Both men were shocked, and they relayed the news to others in the Bethel family. President Knorr became very upset that the information had been given out, and both Arthur and Russell were removed from their positions. This episode bothered me very much. There was sufficient funds available to provide first-class travel accommodations and every luxury for the president of the society, but we couldn't afford to care for the witness girl properly so that she could get home safely. This callous decision had cost her her life. All of this that we've detailed in the last couple of segments leads up to William Cetnar's resignation from Bethel in 1958, which we'll go into next time. Put in a link to a video we did called James, that is the Apostle James, on true religion. Are Jehovah's Witnesses in the truth?